The teams with the longest playoff droughts are having a tough time making progress this season. Where have they gone wrong and what have they done right? Plus, some injury updates for key players and the weekend ahead of NHL games, all on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find us on YouTube, the SiriusXM app, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Gil, happy Friday. How are we doing?
We're doing well. Happy Friday to you. Can't believe that American Thanksgiving is right around the corner. And, you know, that usually means we're starting to get an idea of where teams are in the standings.
Yeah, it's a definite benchmark in the season, and hence our discussion we're going to have about these teams with long playoff droughts and are they making any progress. Before we dig into that, Marc-Andre Fleury got his 1,000th start and won that game. It was his 1,030th career game, obviously coming in relief for some games in the mix there. But just this guy just is having all of these milestones this year. And it's just so fun to see him on this tour of celebration for his career.
I remember going back to the 2004-2005 lockout, going to a game between the AHL affiliates of the Islanders and the Penguins at the Nassau Coliseum. And the big draw was getting to see Marc-Andre Fleury play for the Penguins team. And, yeah, he has just been an integral part of the game, a great goaltender. And as he's winding down his career, to see him sort of take a victory lap, it's very much deserved. And it's great. He's handled it very, very well.
I think so, too. And unfortunately, on the flip side of celebrating things, we have injuries to talk about. Alex Ovechkin, of course, we've been talking about this on the show this week, but now we know broken leg, 4 to 6 weeks is the time frame. Definitely putting that goal record at risk for this season at least.
Yeah, and you know, you sort of have to ask not just how long will he miss, 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, it may be closer to 6 at his age. It takes a little longer to heal once you don't heal as quickly at 38, 39 as you did at 22. But, you know, if it means that it goes till next year, so be it. But it'll be interesting to see not just how long he's out, but then how long does it take him to get back into game shape and to get his stride back?
Absolutely. So we'll see. Freddie Andersen out 8 to 12 weeks. He just had surgery. Carolina seems to be doing okay, but we'll see, what happens down the road and if and when he returns this season. It might be a challenging decision for them to make there. Bruins' new coach got his first win as well. So it was a 1-0 win over Utah, but baby steps here, right?
Well, I mean, isn't that sort of a Boston way of doing things, the way this team plays defense when they're on? So, good for them, and congratulations, obviously. And we'll see whether or not he can remove that interim tag from his job description.
Yeah, we shall see indeed. All right, so we wanted to take a look at the NHL teams with the longest playoff droughts and see if they're making any headway this season. As we said, Thanksgiving is an interesting benchmark, and you get some clues as to are these teams contenders or not. And the team that has had the longest playoff drought is the Buffalo Sabres. We're going to talk about them, the Red Wings, the Sens, and the Ducks and Sharks. as those top 5 teams with the longest playoff droughts here. So starting with those Buffalo Sabres, they have not made the playoffs since 2010, 2011, and they seem to be hanging in this abyss of some bad draft lottery luck, right? Where they have not gotten that first overall pick. And then that guy that they do get leaving before they get to their peak, right? So they've had this mix of promising young talent who aren't there yet and veterans that they've brought in. And it just has gotten them nowhere this whole time, right?
It does sort of feel like they're going around in circles. And one thing that has been an issue for the Sabres for a while is goaltending. They're sort of hoping right now that they've gotten the right guy. But is Luukkonen the right answer? Is Levy the right answer? Long term, he doesn't seem to be having a great start to the season. It seems to be like one of the last missing ingredients for this team that always seems to be right on the cusp of making the playoffs, but can't seem to end that drought.
Yeah, and Devin Levi had a rough game against the Flyers that I saw recently. They just sent him down to Rochester again. So it's just been a tough cycle overall for goaltending in Buffalo. I agree. And yeah, and they've just had a really difficult time like getting those young players to develop and putting some like over expectation on them, right? Too early because this team like needs something to happen here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and every year is the year, right? Every year they add one little piece or get a new player,
Yeah.
and this is the year the young talent in Buffalo solidifies and congeals and meshes, and they go out and every year something happens that they just end up missing the playoffs by 3 points, 5 points, 2 points. It's like they're never terrible enough to be so far out of a playoff spot that you tear it down again, but they just can't seem to take that last step.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it feels like Lucy with the football with this team. Every single year the prediction is, oh, this is the year that they could, crack the playoffs, and then it just doesn't happen. It seems like they're on a similar path this year based on everything that's going, that they'll be like a distant contender for a playoff spot, but not quite get there in the end. But there's lots of games left to play, so prove us wrong, Buffalo Sabres. The Detroit Red Wings have been out of the playoffs for 8 seasons, and after an incredible stretch of consistently good teams and a strong core, once they went off the cliff, they really went off the cliff, right? And then Steve Yzerman comes in and he has the Yzer plan. But how's that going so far, Gil?
Yeah, it's still up in the air. And, I saw the Red Wings last night against the Islanders. Hard to believe with all the talent on this team that they are near the bottom, 29th in the league in goals scored, and yet 5th on the power play. So here's a team that 5-on-5 is just struggling to score, and that's with Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat and Lucas Raymond. So, go figure what's missing from this team. And again, very much like Buffalo, it's been, this is the year for the last 3 or 4 years, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Right. And I think that, one could argue a couple of things. Number one, the defense has not been what it was in days gone by, right? And they haven't really solidified that. Now, Seider, phenomenal superstar defenseman, right? But beyond that, it's a little bit dicey still. And their draft history, like, part of the problem is they weren't bad enough either, right?
Right.
They didn't get a ton of great draft picks, and then they traded draft picks as well over the years. But in the last several years, like, they got Lucas Raymond in 2020, and that was 4th overall, but, that was the highest draft pick that they've had over this stretch. And so I think it's a combination of the development not meshing at the right time with the right players and just, a lack of a solidifying superstar on this team. The old Red Wings had like 2 or 3 of them at a time.
More like 5 or 6 at a
Well,
time
yeah.
at one point. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
they do seem to lack that one star, and I think depth is a problem. They're a top-heavy team right now
yeah.
offensively.
Yeah. Yeah. So, both the Sabres and the Red Wings, I think, have struggled from some similar things and some different things. Because I do think the Iser plan at least was a more solid plan. It's not working entirely, but it was a plan. The Sabres seem to be doing things more on the fly, right?
Well, Yzerman definitely laid out this plan, but you still need a little bit of luck when you
Mhm.
put that into, whether it's winning a lottery once in a while or just getting the right players healthy at the right time. So the plan is there, but you still need a little bit of luck to make it all work.
Yeah. Well, the Ottawa Senators, Anaheim Ducks, and San Jose Sharks are trying to move up in the standings as well. We're going to talk about how they're doing coming up next. Some of the best concerts of the year take place in the fall, and it's my favorite time to head to a show. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my favorite parts of the Game Time app is their zone deals. And right now, Game Time is having an exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. Go to Game Time app to purchase those tickets and get 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% on home plate area seats. Best of all, they have all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate the feature, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. So, continuing our discussion about teams with the longest playoff droughts, the Ottawa Senators' last playoff run was in 2016-17. So, that's 7 seasons, potentially going on 8. And I think for them this season, I do think they're making some progress here as far as their gameplay. Unfortunately, it's not translating to wins enough. And,
Yeah.
I've seen them play really strong stretches of hockey. They're not playing complete games, that's for sure. Right now, they're on a 4-game losing streak here, and they're, near the bottom of the Atlantic Division, hanging out with the Montreal Canadiens and the aforementioned Detroit Red Wings right above them. So, uh, what's your take on the Ottawa Senators and why they've struggled?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, goaltending has been an issue, and they go out this year and get Linus Ullmark, and he's not been the same guy he was in Boston. Now, again, it's still a small sample size. He's only started 11 games, but a 3.00 goals against average and an 887 save percentage is not what they expected when they traded for Linus Ullmark. So to me, that's sort of missing a little bit. And then, right now, I think Ottawa is so close but they're sort of in the middle. They're an average offensive team. They're an average defensive team. The
Yeah.
penalty kill is 19th in the league. They just seem to be a team that if they could just mesh a little bit better, I think they have a pretty good shot of making a run, but the consistency, like you said, just hasn't been there.
Yeah, it just feels like they're a little too far out of the picture. And you look at their goal differential right now, I think it's only like a -2 or
Yeah,
something right now,
yeah.
which for a team that's in 7th place in the division is not terrible, right? So they are scoring some goals. They're just having that defensive and goaltending issue. They're not scoring enough goals to overcome the goals that they're allowing for the most part right now. And
Right.
so, it's tough. I think that this team, I think has suffered from not being a premier destination for free agents. But then they have swung big on some free agents that just haven't worked out. And I, I think it's just been kind of a mismatch of players here, where they have some individual very good players. They're just not meshing well. The chemistry isn't there, and that's, I think, my general take on it. I think, one of the biggest failures in terms of a strong player that didn't work out there is Jacob Chikrin. I mean, he's
Hmm.
been a problem in other locations
Yeah,
as
not
well.
unique to Ottawa.
Not unique to Ottawa, but he seems to be doing mostly okay with the Caps, right?
Right, right. You got to be in the right situation. And with Ottawa, what do you think about this? They just lack a superstar. They lack that
Mhm.
one player, like, who just makes everyone around him better and who the team rallies around.
Right, and that's another thing. We can always go back to their draft history here. Now, this past year, they drafted Carter Yakimchuk, who's phenomenal, and I think will be a very, very good addition to this team down the road. But the previous 2 years, they did not have a first round pick. Uh, and that is going to have an effect on your ability to develop young superstars on your team. And even in 2023, they didn't have a pick till the fourth round.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to have a huge impact on your ability to make progress here. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at with Ottawa. And they're going to be on the outside looking in again this year. Turning our attention to the Anaheim Ducks, who are next on our list. Now, they've had, I think, some unlucky draft situations where they did get the second overall pick once, but even in the lotteries where maybe you would think they could have gotten the first overall pick, they did not, and they did not once in the worst of the worst years for them. So that could be having an effect. And one of those top picks they had, Jamie Drysdale, is now on the Flyers and also injured. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I think that they've had a hard time blending this generally accepted idea of drafting and developing from within and supplementing with veterans. I don't think they've had the right veterans, to be honest.
No, I don't think they've had the right veterans. And then, you have guys like Trevor Zegras, who is so talented, but right now, 2 goals and 6 points in 18 games. He just has not taken that next step to become a consistently productive player. And, what is it, 2 years now that we've heard trade rumors possibly about him, although he is still an Anaheim Duck.
Yeah, I think, they have had a good run recently, racking up 3 wins in a row, against, some okay teams. Well, the Stars are a good team
Yeah.
generally,
Yeah.
but, like, they won against the Red Wings and the Blackhawks were the other 2. But I think there is some progress here, but they were so far out of the picture that I think they're moving from, like, a bottom dwelling team to like, somewhere in the 5 to 10 bottom of the league range as opposed to the bottom 5, right?
It's
Which is
progress.
good. It's progress, but, like, I just don't think they're anywhere near playoff contention, at least for this year and probably next year.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is they've cut down the goals against. And that,
Yeah.
you know what? You can make the playoffs with good defense and an average offense. Now, their offense isn't average yet, but it's definitely, preventing goals against. You can't win very easily if you're trying to win every game 7-6. That just isn't a winning formula in the NHL today.
Right. Right. It's I think the Ducks are gonna be a really interesting team to watch over the next several years, because I think of any of these teams, the Ducks maybe have the most potential to make steady progress, whereas some of the other teams that we've already talked about have been languishing in nothingness for the last several years. So Ducks haven't had to quite do that yet, I think, in this current iteration of what they're trying to do. The San Jose Sharks, on the other hand, I think are an exercise in frustration because they have had some really good picks over the last couple of years, and this is the year where two of those picks are expected to, in some ways, carry the team, which I think is unfair in Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith, when they still just don't have the defense to support them whatsoever.
Yeah, the defense is very, very shaky, to say the least. They're next to last right now in goals against in the league. And, if anything, the thing you take solace in if you're a San Jose Sharks fan is that right now there is a plan. And while it may take time, you do have a lot of young, talented players to watch and give the organization hope. Now, the key is to sprinkle in the right veterans and get that team to start making progress. I think by the end of this season, they have to start playing better. But right now, their defense as a team, the blue line, and even the way the forwards don't necessarily come back to support the team defensively, it's a big obstacle for this team to overcome.
Yeah, and so I think that's where like the big differential here is. So the Sabres, Red Wings, and Ottawa, there's some expectations now. Like they've been languishing. The Ducks and Sharks have nowhere to go but up, and I think there's a little bit of hope there. But it certainly won't be for this year for any of these teams, in my opinion, at least. But we'll see.
Doesn't look that way. I mean, the Sharks took a little too long to tear down and do their full
Right.
rebuild, and that's why it's taking them so long. The longer you wait, the deeper the hole that you end up digging. At least I think right now there is a plan. And, that I think should give hope to San Jose fans.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, we've got an exciting weekend of action ahead in the NHL, and we're gonna dig into some of the key games coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And hockey fans, you could use your knowledge of the game to place some exciting bets on FanDuel. Check out the latest odds on the app. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Gil, it is a very light Friday in NHL action. We have the Winnipeg Jets visiting the woeful Pittsburgh Penguins at this point. Might be the next coach on the chopping block there.
Yeah, that very well could be. And yeah, the Jets keep on keeping on. 16-3 on the year. Obviously, if you're the Penguins, getting a win in a game like this could give you a little jolt, but boy, Winnipeg has been so good.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see what happens after this game should the Penguins lose. The teams we were just talking about, two of them are facing each other. The Sabres at the Ducks. Both of them are even Steven right now. 9-9-1 for the Sabres, 8-8-2 for the Ducks. So we'll see who prevails in this playoff drought battle.
One of these teams will be above NHL 500 by the end of the night. So
that is true. On Saturday, one of the afternoon games, the Wild at the Flames, I think is one of the more interesting matchups. I think, the Flames started out really hot this season, pun intended. have had a little bit of a mixed bag, but then have been playing really well recently overall, and going up against this juggernaut that seems to be the Minnesota Wild should be a really good matchup.
Yeah, and the Wild not getting as much attention because of how well Winnipeg has started. 13-3-3, and they're not even in first place. The fact that this game is in Calgary, I think, makes it even more interesting. And, these two teams will be battling for playoff positioning. I love this game.
Yeah, and the Wild are really good on the road,
Yep.
so I think this should be a real fun game. The Avalanche at Panthers, I think, is going to be interesting. The Panthers just lost to the Blackhawks of all teams, and the Avalanche seem to be getting their footing right now. So this is going to be a good one.
It is a good one. The classic 6 o'clock Eastern time start in Florida. But yeah, you knew the Avalanche weren't going to stay that bad for long, and
Right.
they seem to be finding their stride. And Florida, they've been a little inconsistent. Some nights they look like the team that won the Stanley Cup last year, and some nights they just don't look like they found themselves.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one indeed. Looking at the other one of the other teams we just talked about, the Canucks are visiting the Ottawa Senators, and the Canucks have also been a little inconsistent this season, and so I think this is a really good opportunity for the Senators here.
Yeah, it is. And, obviously coming east, not always easy for those West Coast teams. If the Senators can get a win here, they've got to end that losing streak.
Yeah, they really do. The Red Wings, one of the other teams we talked about, are hosting the Boston Bruins again with their new coach, and maybe some new energy there. But going into Detroit, I think, given all these circumstances, is going to be tough.
Low scoring game. That's what I'm looking for
Yes,
here between these two teams. Take the under,
right. And then the Dallas Stars are visiting the Tampa Bay Lightning, who was just involved in a goal scorers duel. They're losing in overtime to the Columbus Blue Jackets. That was kind of a crazy game.
That was an exciting and fun game last night. No question about that. The Lightning are going to want to tighten things up after giving up that many goals. Dallas playing well all season. I love this matchup.
Yeah, I think the other main game we're looking at for that night is the Devils visiting the Washington Capitals, because the Devils have kind of been ignored a little bit in the same way that the Minnesota Wild has. They're just like quietly doing their thing and mostly winning games here. And the Caps are settling into their non-Ovi look, and so they've had to make some adjustments, and so facing a tough Devils team is going to be an interesting test for them.
It will be, and the question really becomes, when a star like Ovechkin goes down, sometimes teams rally, and for a few games they're able to raise their level and sort of compensate. The question is, can they do that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, where, can they keep playing at the pace they've been playing, 13-5-1?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the late night game for that day, the New York Rangers are visiting the Edmonton Oilers, and the Rangers just lost to the Flames, who we just talked about earlier in the segment. And I think they're going to want to bounce back. The Oilers have been a mixed bag this season so far, with some really good stretches and some not so good stretches. So it's like, which Oilers team is going to show up?
Yeah, the inconsistency in Edmonton is pretty tough to fathom. And, the Rangers have only played 18 games, which is among the fewest in the NHL. So, they're in fourth place right now, but they've got games in hand on the teams ahead of them.
They do. So, again, another really fun day with a ton of teams playing a ton of games this Saturday. Sunday is pretty bleak in hockey land. Only one game with the Utah Hockey Club visiting the Toronto Maple Leafs. And this is the game where, honestly, it's a home game for the Leafs. You have to think they're going to win, but it's hockey, because anything can happen.
And it's a little disappointing. Utah got off to that really good start early in the year, and since then they've cooled off, kind of come back down to earth. Maybe the excitement of playing in a new home and a new arena, a new city has sort of worn off, and this team has sort of gone back to the mean.
Yeah, that absolutely holds true. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. Gil will be back on Monday talking to hosts from around the Locked On NHL network about what's going on with their teams. We'll be back next Friday to recap the week that was and look at the biggest stories in hockey as well as our women's hockey spotlight. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.